There's grown-up ways to handle a disaster, especially when it crosses a border. You call up your neighbor, you share satellite data, you move aircraft, you coordinate firefighters. You ask what the other country needs and what your country can send to help. And then there's the toddler method. You point at the sky, blame your neighbor, and demand more money. And that toddler method also includes the Tariff Act of 1930. And yes, the toddler method is the one that's being chosen by Donald Trump, who says that the United States is being invaded by filthy air from the Canadian wildfires. And he wants Canada to pay through higher tariffs over smoke. Donald Trump is essentially now wanting to tariff smoke. Look, smoke has no passport, no customs form, no declared country of origin. It's just microscopic particles riding the wind. And about to learn that Donald Trump has heard about Section 338. And look, Donald Trump has called the wildfires willful negligence and said that the cost of the pollution must be added to tariffs that Canada is already paying. And this all came after he saw Prime Minister Mark Carney at the World Cup final, and he said that Canada should pay damages. And by Monday, this tantrum was no longer theoretical. Donald Trump announcing 50% tariffs on many Canadian goods and told aides to consider even more over the wildfire smoke. The president is turning hockey sticks, wine, cement, cheese. Yes, your poutine is now 50% more expensive because of Donald Trump. And then he's trying to tariff breathable air, and he's putting it all in one giant grievance gift basket from hell with more on the way. And they say that that first round of tariffs isn't related to the smoke, and there's a new round on the way. Great. Thanks, Donald Trump. And the smoke line is especially stupid because wildfire smoke doesn't respect nationalism. British Columbia issued air quality warnings because smoke from major fires in Washington and Oregon in the United States was drifting north. So now, by Donald Trump's logic, Canada should send us an invoice by sunset. Dear United States, your trees crossed the border without documentation. We're adding a surcharge to Idaho potatoes, and your smoke is more expensive than ours. And look, climate change, that's what's making fire seasons hotter, longer, and harder to control. And if you're going to blame anybody and invoice anybody, Donald Trump and his regime are the ones that have spent years gutting climate policy. And now Donald Trump is staring at the atmosphere and saying, "You violated my trade agreement." When you ask people in Canada, like Ontario Premier Doug Ford, they respond exactly the way allies should. Okay? He responded how you should. He called this a bunch of rubbish when Donald Trump starts blaming Canada during an emergency. And he asked why the United States wasn't sending water and the airplanes to drop water and sending help, especially since Canadian crews crossed the border, came south, and helped us fight California's fires. That's a normal relationship between neighboring countries. Your house burns, I bring you a hose. My house burns, you bring me supplies, you bring me water. Yet Donald Trump's version is, your house burns, I threaten to make your cheese more expensive. And I've got to ask, want to hear from you. How should the United States and Canada work together when there's a disaster that's crossing a border? Should it be already written out that there's a joint crew, shared aircraft, a permanent joint wildfire command? Put serious answers in the comments because tariffing the wind cannot be the best available idea to a continent that has, 400 million people? Though Tariff the Wind does sound like a great album name for a hairband. But look, this is a real issue that American workers are already breathing through the consequences. Workers at a Ford plant in Michigan were hospitalized after laboring without air conditioning while the smoke poured in through the region. Donald Trump did not announce emergency workplace protections. He didn't demand better ventilation or even paid leave during hazardous air. He simply found a neighbor to punish and declares victory by making us, Americans, pay more. Because remember, kids, Americans are the ones that pay the tariffs. Importers pay them, costs move through the supply chain, and families see the result in prices. So yes, your poutine is about to go through the roof. And Trump is taxing American consumers because air moved south from a fire, while air from American fires moved north. Donald Trump, I'm just going to make this plain. You cannot tariff smoke, you can't sanction the wind, and you cannot threaten climate change into respecting a border. However, you can cooperate with the country next door. You can better fund firefighters. And you can stop pretending that every emergency is another chance to make people think that diplomacy means yelling at Canada. Donald Trump had Mark Carney sitting next to him at the World Cup. And instead, he used that weekend to talk about excluding Canada from the next tournament and then charging Canada for smoke. Subscribe, because the trade war has officially reached the very air we breathe. And somehow, Fox News will still call that a brave strategy for Donald Trump.